Hello, readers by eyes and by ears. This is Marty Chen, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Okay, it is officially May 29th, 7:40 p.m. my time, and I already read this morning, but I am reading again just to see how far I can get before I feel like doing nothing for the rest of the evening, and then I will read again in the morning. My desire is to go ahead and just give you guys a long video so we can finish out this story because we have about 60 pages left. Let's see if that actually happens. Regardless, even if it doesn't, later on tonight, well, tomorrow, but tonight when you hear this video, there will be a releasing of the chapters that I don't finish. But we shall see how far I get, shan't we? Let's go ahead and get started, picking up with Chapter 110. Hung Province contained the former capital city of Pingcheng. Before Emperor Xiaowen had relocated his capital to Luoyang, it had been the capital of the Wei dynasty for generations. Even when it was no longer the capital, several emperors had continued living there. An era of royalty remained, imparting the city with a regal qi. Today, although nowhere near as prosperous as Luoyang, it was still a major metropolis. North of the city, everything beyond the thin lines of the official roads was forest. It was now summer, and the leaves on the trees were lush as they swayed delicately in the wind. At the foot of the mountain, beside the main road, sat a tea house. Its thatched roof was woven from hay, and cattail reeds supported the bamboo poles, and it sheltered a small area of spread mats without even a table. A tea house like this was only meant as a small rest stop for passing woodcutters and hunters before they entered the mountains. A woodcutter stood outside it at a bit of a loss. It was rare to meet anyone here, much less 4 people taking up all the cattail mats. As he tried to walk around them, one of the strangers called out, "Sir, please wait." A Tsway guard approached with a bowl of steaming tea. They'd purchased the hot tea and bowls outside the city. Tsway loathed extravagant purchases and had been adamantly against spending on new bowls. Naturally, Feng Xiao had footed the bill. The woodcutter accepted the tea. Bewildered, he asked, "Do your lordships wish to hike up the mountain?" He noticed that 2 of them were better dressed than the others and surmised they were young masters of a wealthy family who had come out to enjoy themselves. He remarked, glancing up at the sky, "It looks like a storm's coming. I'd suggest you wait before going up the mountain." The Tsway guard smiled. "Thank you very much for the warning, but we'd like to ask you something. Is there a Mount Tiannan around here somewhere?" The woodcutter was about to shake his head, then checked himself. "Ah, there is a mountain. We locals call it Ruyi Mountain, but one of the scholars in the county told me it has another name. Tian something. I can't remember. It might be the mountain you're talking about." "Where is this mountain?" asked the Tsway guard. The woodcutter pointed straight ahead. "It's that one." Everyone followed his pointing finger. Behind the mountain before them jutted a second peak. It was quite a bit taller than the mountains around it, its summit shrouded in mist like the hidden abode of immortals. Feng Xiao looked at Tsway, who shook his head slightly. He wasn't sure either. The woodcutter finished his tea, then watched as the group rose and bade him farewell. When they started walking in the direction of the mountain, he warned them again. "The mountain roads will be slippery from the rain. It's no joke." Feng Xiao smiled. "So we need to hurry up the mountain before the rain arrives. Thank you." He walked in front, fanning himself, while Tsway walked with 1 guard in front and 1 guard behind for protection. A carriage was no good in terrain like this. Tsway grabbed a length of bamboo to use as a walking stick and followed Feng Xiao up the mountain trail, albeit at a markedly slower pace. The woodcutter watched their retreating backs in astonishment. They hadn't listened to his advice at all. He shook his head and sighed. Young people these days." Then he picked up his basket and axe and trudged off toward another slope. He couldn't have known that at that very moment Feng Xiao was saying to Tsway, "Dark clouds overhead. Are you sure there will be no rain today?" Tsway's lashes fluttered. He didn't raise his head. "It won't rain here." He'd hardly spoken when a strong gust of wind buffeted them. Tsway was standing at a turn in the mountain path and almost lost his footing. He was on the verge of being blown right off when Feng Xiao grabbed his shoulder and pulled him back, faster even than the Tsway guards beside him. Feng Xiao didn't hesitate to mock him. "In my opinion, you should go back down the mountain and wait for us. You're nothing but a burden." Tsway paid him no heed. He squinted up the mountainside before pointing in another direction. "Let's go up there and take a look." Sure enough, the dark clouds were swiftly blown over to the neighboring peak. Rain fell in the west, but in the east the sun shone and the sky above their heads was bright and clear. How had Tsway cultivated such a skill? Feng Xiao was shocked he could accurately discern the weather from such a distance. It was a hard road to their destination, and the climb was particularly agonizing for Tsway. His face was as white as paper, and he needed to rest every few steps. Feng Xiao was beginning to think the next gust might scatter him to the four winds. When they arrived, they discovered a cave entrance concealed beneath the luxuriant canopy of a tree. The cave was deep. Even the glare of the summer sun couldn't penetrate the darkness. The clue Yuan-sansa had shared with them was many years old, and the woods now were much denser than in the painting. It should have been near impossible for anyone to tell at a glance if this spot was truly the hiding place of the Wei dynasty's secret treasure. "How could you tell?" Feng Xiao asked curiously. "This mountain has a unique shape," said Tsway. He produced the little picture and pointed to the mountain within it, then pointed at his feet. "Did you notice? Though the mountain is steep, the path we took was not. We encountered no danger on our way." "Except when you almost fell off," Feng Xiao reminded him. Tsway turned a deaf ear and continued. "On our way up, I noticed faint ruts in the stones of the path, evidence that it was built for the easy transport of building materials and soldiers and craftsmen." He asked the Tsway guards to push aside the nearby stones and cut away some of the foliage screening the entrance. As they worked, he wiped away some of the sand on the ground with his foot, revealing a few deep grooves, too regular to be the result of wind or rain. Feng Xiao crouched down and ran his fingers over them. Deep and uniform. Something was dragged across the ground. Tsway looked around. They must have searched for a long time before they found this place. It's halfway up the mountain, yet the surrounding terrain is gentle. They transported tools up the mountain and carved out the interior, then let the dense vegetation conceal the exterior. It's difficult to discover. Even if passing woodcutters or hunters saw the cave entrance, they wouldn't be likely to enter. And if they were curious enough to go in, he paused, there's a high chance they wouldn't come back out. Feng Xiao arched a brow. "Are you sure there's hidden treasure in such a small space? How would one even bring all that armor out through such a narrow entrance? Did Emperor Wei not consider such things? Perhaps Yuan-sansa deceived you." Tsway shook his head. "I've had Yuan-sansa's background thoroughly investigated. There's no mistake. Something's inside. Let's go take a look." The Tsway guards led the way. Tsway had set to rolling up his sleeves in preparation for entering when Feng Xiao suddenly grabbed his wrist, his gaze flickering with something obscure. "You can wait for us outside. Look how sick you are. Won't I just waste my energy saving you?" With a sigh, Tsway said, "Do you think I'm going in there just to be a burden? There are undoubtedly hidden traps inside. I might not be an expert on traps, but I know a thing or two. Without me, it won't matter how powerful a martial artist you are. You won't make it out unscathed." Feng Xiao's usual languid smile quickly returned. He leaned in, closing the distance between them. "Taoist Master Tsway, are you worried about me?" "I am," said Tsway indifferently. "After all, Keeping Deputy Chief Feng alive is crucial to my safety on the way back." The Tsway guards had already disappeared into the mouth of the cave. Tsway turned away and followed suit. The moment he entered, the air pressed in on him, gloomy and damp, as if he'd stepped into another world entirely. The darkness was so complete that he couldn't see his own hand before his face, and the ground under his feet was slick with moisture. If he wasn't careful, he'd slip and fall. Squinting ahead, he called out, "Don't touch the walls." Chapter 111. "Try to stay in the middle. Don't touch the walls," Tsway repeated. "What is it?" The Lingsan-covered walls sparkled with silver, captivating yet uncanny. Feng Xiao studied them by the light of the torch one of the guards carried. "It's quite beautiful." "It's a residue produced by the caterpillars of the silver dust butterfly," said Tsway. "The butterflies live in the dark, and the silver scales on their wings glow. Though their bodies aren't poisonous, the scales on their wings are." "Are they commonly found in damp caves?" Tsway saw what he was getting at. He shook his head before remembering Feng Xiao was up ahead and couldn't see him. "Silver dust butterflies are usually found in the southwest," he murmured. "They're rare here in the north, but they live in swarms and their lifespans are short. I doubt there are more of them after this passage." Then this was only the first trap. This toxic silver dust was likely nothing compared to the dangers that lurked ahead. A rush of damp, stale air hit Tsway full in the face and made him cough. The sound echoed through the passage, bouncing back at him from the far walls. As they walked, the ground beneath his feet gradually leveled out and was no longer as slippery. His bamboo walking stick thudded dully against the stone, the sound reverberating through their hearts like that of a monk striking a temple block. They reached the end of the passage, and the cave opened up before them. Vines dangled from above, so low they could almost reach up to touch them. A gentle draft was blowing in from somewhere, caressing their cheeks with the cold damp of the cave. Tsway scented danger. He looked down at his feet. The light of the torch revealed the stone tiles to be free of lichen. Beneath a scattering of dust and sand were engraved patterns, resplendent peonies, and intricate lotus vines. Treasure troves like these were usually no more than fanciful contingency plans left by an emperor for his descendants. There was no need to go to the trouble of paving the floor and carving the tiles with patterns. Clearly, Emperor Wei hadn't intended this cave to be merely a storehouse for relics. He must have anticipated that if his descendants one day needed to flee here, they would temporarily... He froze. "Back up!" Feng Xiao reacted first. He leapt backward, grabbing Tsway's arms and hauling him back with him. The Tsway guards were a half step too slow. One felt a cold wind bearing down on his head an instant before sharp agony pierced his nose. Sharp blades shot up from the tiles, slicing off the tip of the man's nose. Blood misted the air. Quick again, Feng Xiao struck several acupoints on the man's body to stop the bleeding, then held up the torch to take a closer look. "It's not poisoned." The wound looked horrific, but they'd brought medicine for incised wounds. The other Tsway guard swiftly bandaged his companion, but the tip of his nose was gone for good. "You leave first," said Tsway. "Go down the mountain and wait for us there." The injured Tsway guard refused. "Lord Chief, it's only a flesh wound. It won't hamper my performance." Feng Xiao didn't involve himself in their conversation. He dropped to the floor and marveled at the sharp blade peeking out from the stone tile. A blade this sharp must have been forged using ancient methods. When we head back, remind me to take it with us. I'll have it reforged into a new sword. It'll be better than the one I used on Foar. But how did you know it was a trap?" "The tiles look similar, but they're set at different heights. The differences are regular." Tsway walked over and placed his hand on a tile patterned with lotus vines, then slowly traced a path in a clockwise direction. Look, if we start with this tile, they get lower and lower. Then here, they return to their original height. Feel for yourself. I'm not touching that. The ground is filthy. Just tell me. Tsway silently willed away the vein throbbing in his forehead. I've seen this kind of trap before. The pattern is a warning to those who belong here, but trespassers won't recognize it, so they'll be caught. Feng Xiao fanned himself. There's no rhyme or reason to how the patterns are arranged. I trust this was done to mislead trespassers as well? Correct. Tsway looked at Feng Xiao in irritation. It's freezing in here. Can you stop waving that fan around? Feng Xiao studied Tsway face, which was as white as snow. He shook his head. It's not too late for you to leave, he mocked, but he snapped the fan shut. Next came the sound of dripping, followed by the patter of water over their heads. An ethereal mist descended from above. As Feng Xiao stepped into the drizzle, a shapeless barrier of qi knocked the water away. His clothes remained dry. Rain in a cave? He poked at the mist with his fan. It's not poisonous gas, is it? Tsway shook his head. There was dense fog around the mountain earlier. There must be another floor above, and that's where the exit is. If I'm not mistaken, the current floor is filled with traps as a deterrent, while the second floor will hold the treasure. The passage should be up ahead. The Tsway guard's wound had stopped bleeding, and he insisted on staying. Tsway didn't order him to leave, so the group continued onward as four. This time, Tsway took the lead. He proceeded with excruciating slowness, pausing to observe after each step. The injured Tsway guard took up the rear, his companion ahead of him. They could, of course, have used Qinggong to fly ahead. It would have been faster. But there was no guarantee they wouldn't land in another trap. Tsway's approach took much longer, but it was also much safer. The hanging vines grew lower and lower, blocking their view. The Tsway guard stepped to the front to push them aside. Stalagmites of varying sizes rose from the ground. From this, they could guess that the cave was likely a natural one. A vast and empty cave like this had infinite potential. It was large enough to house many people, perhaps even an entire royal battalion. No wonder Emperor Wei had claimed it was a secret refuge. In such a silent cave, even the subtle rustling of leaves might set one on edge. Tsway's persistent coughs accompanied them, yet somehow the sound soothed them instead. It wasn't the Tsway guard's first mission. They were experienced men who had encountered their fair share of unexpected situations. The guard in front didn't let his anxiety show. He simply followed Feng Xiao around the stalagmite. There was a bend in the path up ahead and a faint glimmer of light. An exit? He was delighted, but at that moment he heard a low groan from the guard behind him. He jerked around and found nothing but empty space. "Lord Chief!" he cried. "Jiangsong is gone!" No response. Tsway and Feng Xiao, too, had disappeared. The shocked guard turned the corner, but there was still no sign of any of his companions. Even the light seemed to have been an illusion. Before him was the same deep and endless darkness, a passage leading to who knew where. The only light came from the torch he held. After walking so long, the torch was nearly spent. The flame guttered feebly, like an old man struggling to catch his breath, fading away until the darkness finally took him. Everything went black. The guard reached into his lapels for another torch, but before his fingers touched it, an unseen force seized his body. It was as if he'd stepped into quicksand. First his feet were trapped, and then the rest of him was dragged down into the dark. Tsway was still standing in place. He hadn't moved. He hadn't fallen, and he hadn't walked too far ahead. In truth, he'd noticed something amiss the moment he'd gone around the first stalagmite. The sense of wrongness hadn't been based on any perceived threat. It was no more than a faint niggling, something he couldn't put his finger on. He'd forged ahead, hoping to spot more clues as they went. Stalagmites thronged the trees in the cave. The torch had been unable to illuminate them all, but even within the small halo of its light, he could see there had been many. Was the problem with the stalagmites? He frowned slightly, a rare trace of doubt resurfacing on his features. It was unfortunate Feng Xiao was behind him and couldn't see. By now, he'd reached the fourth stalagmite. "I think there might be a problem with the stalagmites," he called to the man behind him. But Feng Xiao didn't respond. He whirled around. The other three were gone. Tsway sighed. So his hunch had been right. He supported himself against the stalagmite for a moment, recalling how the cave had looked when he'd first entered. "I made a mistake," he muttered. He'd assumed each trap was separate and self-contained. There'd been no connection between the silver dust butterflies and the stone tile traps, which seemed to have confirmed his guess. But in truth, the moment they'd entered the cave, they'd stepped into a single enormous trap, an Ursa Major twin jade array. As the name suggested, this array was patterned after the 7 stars forming the constellation Ursa Major. 7 traps had been laid around them, and the moment they interacted with one, they'd find themselves snared within a sub-array nearby. While he'd been so focused on avoiding the tile trap, he'd stepped into the sub-array formed by the stalagmites. Right now, the 4 of them weren't far away from each other, but as long as they were trapped in the array, they might as well be on opposite ends of the earth. They were completely out of reach, like the distant light of the stars. The current Ursa Major sub-array was based on one of the 4 endgame compositions in the strategy game of Xiangqi, known as the Gathering of 7 Stars. Even if someone could tell this array was no ordinary one, if they didn't know the principles of its composition, they'd be rats in a trap, only able to wallow in despair. It didn't matter who you were, young or old, alive or dead, anyone caught in the array would find themselves unable to leave. At this moment, Tsway had no way to save the others. He could only focus on saving himself. He closed his eyes, casting his mind back to the solution of this particular endgame composition. Deep within his memory, Tsway found a door slightly ajar. What would await him if he opened that door? Tsway tossed away the torch he was holding. He gripped his bamboo walking stick and placed his other hand on the stalagmite, then slowly groped his way forward. After a few steps, he backed up again, circling around to a nearby stalagmite and starting the process anew. Anyone watching would have thought him wandering about aimlessly, but as he fumbled about in the dark, he slowly began to make his way out of the array. When he next opened his eyes, a glimmer of light greeted him, a flickering candle flame that melted away the chill of the cave. Tsway looked behind him and saw nothing but darkness. Feng Xiao and the 2 guards were still trapped within the array. Should he continue forward, or should he wade back in and find them? Tsway turned around, ready to head back into the array. "Since you're out now, why go back in? The Tsway I know isn't so soft-hearted." The voice came from behind him. Other than their party of 4, there shouldn't have been anyone else in the cave, yet the voice was acutely familiar. Tsway whipped around. The figure of a man stood near the candles beside the entrance. His silhouette was blurred, his face impossible to make out. But Tsway could never fail to recognize that voice. After all, they'd spoken not long ago. "Yuan-san," Tsway whispered. "To think it was you." Chapter 112. Yuan-san ambled over to him. "Surprised?" Tsway was honest. "I was, at first. But now that I think about it, it makes sense." Yuan-san looked somewhat surprised himself. Why do you say so? Your appearance was too convenient. Just as I returned to Boling, you happened to be transferred there as the new commandery governor. Upon returning to the Tsway family, I'd have to address those old affairs. You being the commandery governor, in addition to Lady Yu's shishong, would make me lower my guard, and I'd be content to trust in the results of my own investigations. Your background wasn't difficult to trace. You knew the Zoya Bureau would eventually find you and ask about the location of the treasure. But if you came to me yourself, you could control the situation, and I'd have less cause to be suspicious. I had heard Chief Tsway has a heart of steel, but it still softened when you met an old friend of your late mother. No need to be so modest, said Tsway coolly. I wasn't soft-hearted. You were clever. Seeing Tsway was actually cupping his hands at him, Yuan Sansa couldn't help but laugh. Chief Tsway is truly amazing. Right now, Tsway was meat on the chopping block. He knew no martial arts, and this was Yuan Sansa's territory. He was utterly powerless, but Yuan Sansa seemed to hold some fondness for him still. His tone was pleasant, and he'd yet to attack. But behind Tsway lay that dark and oppressive array. Feng Xiao and the two guards had yet to emerge. So it was a fake identity? Asked Tsway. Yuan Sansa shook his head. It was real. I really am your mother Shishong, and the Yu family was very kind to me. Your grandfather accepted me into the Yu residence and took great pains to teach me. When I left them, I felt conflicted and troubled by the burden of my past. I wanted to chart my own path. I didn't want to follow the one your grandfather set out for me, to study, to marry, and to spend the rest of my life just this way. I felt guilt toward Lady Yu, but I had to leave. He sighed, lost in memory. I traveled the world. I saw many novel sights and had many novel experiences. It sent me down a completely different path. Had I stayed with the Yu family, I'd have no doubt lived a life of utter mediocrity. I'd never have tasted true success. And the 13 floors of Yuan gave you the chance to exercise your potential? Yuan Sansa smiled. You're wrong, Xianzhi. The 13 floors of Yuan didn't exist back then, and they're not so wicked as you imagine. Anything you want, they can give you. Footnote here, Xianzhi is virtuous nephew, a respectful address for the son of one's friend. Back to the reading. I want you dead. Can they give me this? Yuan Sansa shrugged. You're a rare genius. You're not like the unwashed masses, who waste their time on pointless debates. I know you have many questions. Once you receive the answers, perhaps you'll change your mind. It's not impossible. Then I shall wait for your silver tongue to work its magic. Yuan Sansa chuckled at his sarcastic tone. Standing in the light of the candles, he regarded Tsway still shrouded in darkness as one might an ignorant child. An unarmed child at that. Even if he had a tongue sharper than the world's swiftest sword, it was a tongue and no more. To Yuan Sansa, Tsway was an infant before a butcher's knife. No matter how many schemes he had up his sleeve, none of them could help him now. Besides, Yuan Sansa considered himself a prudent man. If he'd been all sparkle and no substance, the Yu family wouldn't have been so fond of him. Lady Yu, a woman as sharp as winter frost, wouldn't have agreed to marry him. But even Lady Yu had failed to grasp the extent of Yuan Sansa's ambition. His sights had always been set higher than the shabby plot of land known as Boling. In truth, Yuan Sansa said, the 13 floors of Yuan are capable of far more than you could ever dream. But that aside, I have to ask, did you realize we already met in the capital? Tsway expression shifted. Backlit by the candle's hazy glow, Yuan Sansa raised a hand and mimicked flourishing a sword. With his perfect memory, the motion alone was enough for Tsway to recall. The 1,000-lantern banquet during the Dragon Boat Festival, Princess Leping's Qiling Garden, buried lamp oil, a failed assassination and rebellion. As he spoke each word, his voice was deliberate. Yuan Sansa smiled. Correct. The person in white who lurked beneath the carriage and fought Feng Xiao, That was me. You didn't realize? I went easy on you that night. Considering my skill, how else would I have failed to kill you? When Yuan Sansa had left the Yu family, he truly must have had some unparalleled experiences. The duel that night had proved him to be stronger than Fo'ar. He was Feng Xiao's equal, if not his superior. Many things made sense now. Yuan Sansa was a martial artist, but he'd pretended to be a lawful citizen and trodden the slow road to becoming a court official. The Yuan clan was an influential surname in the north, and after the collapse of the Wei dynasty, many Yuans had gone on to become officials in succeeding dynasties. Yuan Sansa was but one of them. Dynasties had changed again and again throughout the centuries. Emperors would never reject a talented official just because their clan had once sat upon the imperial throne. According to regulation, when an official was transferred, the emperor would summon them to the capital for debriefing. Before heading to Boiling Commandery, Yuan Sansa had gone through that exact process, and he'd made use of the opportunity. Ostensibly, he'd returned to the capital as part of his duties, but he'd secretly been in contact with the rebels. He was known as a rising official. It wasn't hard for him to obtain an invitation to Qilin Garden. No one noticed when a guest slipped away in the middle of the banquet to hide beneath a carriage. Yuan Sansa was both a brilliantly ambitious man and a peerless martial artist. He maintained two identities instead of the pinnacle of the Jianghu. No wonder he'd thought the plain and ordinary Yu family beneath him. If he'd gone easy on Tsway and Feng Xiao that night, it was only so he could show off. And today, he hadn't exposed himself to Tsway merely to tell him his life was in Yuan Sansa's hands. He meant to impress upon him the sheer power of the 13 floors. A group of rebels the Tsway Bureau should have eliminated had freely entered Qilin Garden and made an attempted attack on the guests. Of course they were capable of even more. "It's been a long time since the collapse of the Wei dynasty," said Tsway slowly, "and the current emperor isn't the one who vanquished Wei. Why take revenge on him?" Yuan Sansa shook his head. "I'm not out for revenge. Xianzhi, you think too little of me. To the 13 floors of Yuanhai, the entire world is a chessboard, and all living beings but pieces upon it. If you join us, you'll learn much more." The corner of Tsway mouth curled. Are they not simply plotting to usurp the throne? Why make it sound so noble? I'm afraid you have no skill in persuasion. Surely your leader is more convincing than you are. Where is he? If he comes, perhaps I'll consider it. Yuan Sansa smiled. Why would we require Yi Xiansheng's presence? We have another distinguished guest you haven't seen in some time. He's missed you dearly, so I invited him here so the two of you can reminisce. He gestured toward the candle light spilling out from a nearby doorway, an invitation for Tsway to enter. "My 3 friends are still in the array," said Tsway. "If your aim is to win me over, shouldn't you release them?" "Worry not," said Yuan Sansa. "They're all safe and sound. You'll be able to see them later." It seemed that even Feng Xiao had been captured. Tsway frowned slightly. For the first time in his life, he felt things were spiraling out of control. He suspected he wouldn't be pleased to meet whoever waited in that room. He straightened and tossed away the bamboo walking stick. He had enough light to see by and no longer needed it. He walked steadily forward, step by step. Once past Yuan Sansa, he could see into the chamber. The room was bright and clean. The night pearls inlaid in the walls glowed faintly. It hadn't been candlelight after all. A man sat with his back to him, cross-legged on a cattail mat. He was indeed familiar. So familiar, Tsway could no longer maintain his cold, hardened expression. His shock was starkly visible in his eyes. Yuan Sansa smiled faintly. The man turned around. His hair was the color of snow, his robes such a clean white they seemed to shine. His face still showed vestiges of the handsomeness of his youth, and his smile was warm and familiar. He waved at Tsway. Good gracious, how did you torment yourself into this state? Your complexion's even worse than I remember." The tone was chiding, that of an elder scolding his disciple after the latter's long absence, but Tsway's blood had turned to ice. He stood for a long time, unmoving and silent. The man didn't prompt him, but patiently waited for his response. At last, Tsway walked in and sat on the cattail mat. He got right to the point. "I didn't expect it to be you, Xiansheng." Fahn You-in gave him a kindly smile. "If you'd been able to guess, I wouldn't deserve to be called your Xiansheng. I remember you told me you hate being bound, that you wish to drift free like the clouds or the wild geese, that even though Liuli Palace recruited you, you only accepted the position of consultant so you could come and go as you pleased." "Correct," said Fahn You-in. "That is indeed what I said. You said you're a descendant of the famous Prime Minister Fahn Ju, and your long-life wish is to abide by the teachings of the Fahn clan, to find an enlightened ruler to lead this world, bringing peace and prosperity to all." "I said that too." Fahn You-in smiled. "And that's just what I've been doing." Tsway laughed, a cold, sneering sound. "I can't see how the 13 floors of Yuanhai, a shameless parasite that skulks in the dark, can be more worthy of leading than Yang Jian." Fahn You-in shook his head. "It's been a long time since our last meeting, but your personality is as sharp as ever. But that can be a double-edged sword. If the blade's too sharp, sometimes when you cut others, you cut yourself too." Now that his initial shock had passed, Tsway's face had returned to its usual smooth tranquility. Even Fahn You-in couldn't tell what he was thinking. "No wonder," Tsway said. "From the moment I entered this place, I felt it was familiar. The Ursa Major Twin Jade Array was a formation you personally taught me. You told me once that very few could deploy this array, and those capable of escaping it were fewer still. Was the story about the treasure all part of your scheme?" "No, the treasure is real. Emperor Wei built this place to give his descendants a way to defend themselves if need arose, but we emptied it long ago." Tsway glanced at Yuan Sansa with a smile quite unlike a smile. "So he donated the wealth of his entire clan and became a lackey who lurks undercover among his enemies. He spent so long as an official too. Yuan Shibo is truly a man of great achievements." Yuan Sansa was thick-skinned. He merely replied courteously, "You flatter me, Xianzhi." "Okay, quick footnote. Shibo, that is martial uncle. Back to the story." Seeing them like this, any observer might have thought the three were sitting harmoniously together, happily discussing poetry and essays, rather than the fate of empires. Chapter 113. Fahn You-in still vividly remembered that gloomy day. A misty rain had been falling from the sky as he'd sat alone by the roadside, conducting divinations beneath a thatched roof, when a young man in coarse clothes had approached him. He had closed his broken umbrella and sat down opposite Fahn You-in, but Fahn You-in was immersed in the small array he'd laid out with wooden sticks. He ignored the newcomer. The stranger watched for a while before speaking. "You should add a defensive line at the position of Xun." Really quickly, there is footnote 13. Xun is a trigram representing wind. In the later heaven Bagua, used for living beings, Xun was in the southeast. Resuming the story. Fahn You-in was holding a wooden stick in his hand, about to place it at Xun. Surprised that the young man's thoughts so neatly matched his own, he finally raised his head to get a look at him. "You've studied divination?" The young man shook his head. "I've merely read the 6 yin of the Sublime Grotto by Huang Shigong, but there are many parts I fail to understand." He'd read the book with incomplete understanding, yet he'd already achieved this level of skill. Geniuses really did exist. Fahn You-in had a fondness for talented people. He examined the young man's sickly complexion and his listless air. Then he shook his head. You're fated to achieve great things, yet you find yourself beset by constant misfortune. Crises atop crises, danger atop danger. This is especially hard on your family and friends. The closer someone is to you, the more they will suffer. The young man was unruffled. It's as you say, but I don't believe in fate. You're young and energetic now, said Fahn You-in. You believe the will of man can overcome the will of the heavens. What you don't yet know is that one's fate is a difficult thing to change. I've never thought of changing my fate, the young man said mildly. I simply don't believe in it. What the heavens wish to do to me is their business. What path I choose to walk is mine. There's no connection between the two. Fahn You-in had never met anyone like this young man before. Everyone he'd ever known either strongly believed in fate or organized their life around it, looking for good luck while running from the bad, taking care in everything they did, or had been resolute in rejecting its influence. But this man did neither. He simply refused to cooperate. What fate would befall a person like that? Suddenly, Fahn You-in was interested. What's your name? What do you do for a living? Tsway. I did business, trading, with my foster father. He passed away last month. Why not come with me? The arts, astrology, geography, writing, and divination. I can teach you all these subjects and many more. I won't become anyone's disciple. That's fine. The look of nostalgia came over Fahn You-in as he recalled the past. Though not a name, we're master and disciple in all ways that matter. You're one of the most talented men I've ever met. If your health hadn't prevented you from learning martial arts, you'd probably be a practitioner on par with Yuan-sansa. Yuan-sansa laughed at being used as a benchmark. No one is perfect. As the saying goes, Xianzhi became the Tsway Bureau's chief at an extremely young age, and Dugu Qielwo views him as her confidant. He's already a titan. If he were as skilled with the sword as he is with the pen, even the heavens would grow jealous. The more amiable they pretended to be, the more warning bells rang in Tsway's heart. Fahn You-in could have come to Tsway at any time and spoke these words if he wanted to recruit him. But that would have been too mundane a method, and far less effective than what they were doing now, setting a trap and waiting for Tsway to fall into it, wearing down his morale, then offering him rewards and appealing to sentiment. The appearance of Fahn You-in and Yuan-sansa was surely only the beginning. The 13 floors of Yuan must have more tricks up their sleeve. Something was lurking in the back of Tsway's mind, eager to come to the forefront. He squashed it. Since you wish to recruit me, shouldn't you do the same for my 3 companions? He asked flatly. Yuan-sansa's lips curved in a knowing smile. He looked at Tsway for a long moment before answering. There's no rush. Tsway frowned. It was a fleeting motion, gone in an instant, but Yuan-sansa drew the obvious conclusion. The chief of the Tsway Bureau, a man of relentless logic and reason, was finally experiencing a rare moment of uncertainty. From the minute he'd set foot in Boling, it had been inevitable. Yuan-sansa smiled softly. He looked forward to seeing Tsway's expression when he realized the truth. Fahn You-in was still speaking. Buchu, you were blessed with an immense talent for administration, practically the reincarnation of Zhang Liang himself. All right, footnote 14. Zhang Liang, a great military strategist and politician from the early Western Han dynasty, seen as one of the 3 great heroes. Resuming the reading. Would it not be a pity to limit yourself to leading the Tsway Bureau? Perhaps Yang Jian values your talent, but he doesn't see you as a pillar of his nation the way he does his prime minister and generals. If he did, you'd be part of the Department of State Affairs by now. You were born frail and have suffered your entire life. If you continue to exhaust yourself with all this plotting and running about, you'll die before your time. Tsway lowered his lashes, concealing his eyes from Fahn You-in. Even ants strove to stay alive. No one was willing to die. especially not someone like Tsway, who held such immense authority. If one lost their life, what good was authority? What are the goals of the 13 floors of Yuanhai? If there's someone you wish to make emperor, at least let me meet him so I can judge how capable he is for myself, said Tsway. You'll find out once you join us, said Fahn You-in. Didn't you come up against Duan Qihu in Tiamoa? He dominated the Northwest for decades and was a man of great ability, yet even only ranked 12th. And what about you, Xianzhang? What rank do you and Yuan Sansa hold? Fahn You-in didn't keep him in suspense. Yuan Sansa is 4th, Si Xianzhang. I am 3rd, San Xianzhang. Go-yuan, the leader of the Bu-yo sect who died at the hands of the Zhejian Bureau's deputy chief Feng, was 5th, Wu Xianzhang. 2 mighty talents, yet you rank only 3rd and 4th. If I join the 13 floors, I fear they'll give me Duan Qihu's empty seat and no more. Fahn You-in smiled. Yuan Sansa and I personally came to recruit you. That shows how much our pavilion leader esteems you. If you join us, he'll give you a rank higher than us old men, not lower. The 13 floors overflow with talents, and the scale on which they operate is far beyond what you imagine. You've experienced it yourself. You went to such pains to eradicate Duan Qihu, and the Tsway dynasty declared it a great achievement. But for the 13 floors of Yuanhai, Duan Qihu was no more than a disposable chess piece. Tsway smiled. Not only did I eradicate Duan Qihu, I also rooted out the Prince of Jin's confidant, Yushu, not to mention his double, Youwang. There's also the leader of the Bu-yo sect, Go-yuan. You lost a great many of men to me during the rebellion at Qingli Garden, and yet you're accepting me with open arms. I fear I'll suffer your vengeance if I join. There's no need to worry about that, said Fahn You-in. I called Duan Qihu disposable, but that Go-yuan was something else. Leading the Bu-yo sect made him arrogant. He often disobeyed orders. He was also a Gogurian, a foreigner. That man couldn't be trusted. You did us a favor by removing him. We need someone more trustworthy to take over the Bu-yo sect, and now they will. Studying Fahn You-in's brightly smiling face, Tsway heart sank. Buchu, Fahn You-in patiently continued, you're a clever person. Upstanding men should speak frankly. I've strongly recommended you to the pavilion leader, and he admires you greatly as well. Compared to that two-faced hypocrite Yang Jian, I believe the pavilion leader would make a better emperor. He's a broad-minded man with extraordinary abilities. He won't hold a grudge over what you've done until now. In fact, he admires the clear-minded ruthlessness in which you faced down your enemies. You merely served your master loyally, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you're willing to join us, what's past will be forgiven, written off in a single stroke. So, I didn't guess wrong, said Tsway. Fahn You-in was taken aback. What? You do resent Yang Jian? Fahn You-in hesitated, then sneered. Yang Jian has thousands of enemies. Whether I number among them makes little difference. But you are my disciple. I won't harm you. Considering that I am here now, I fear it no longer matters whether or not I'm willing. Do you remember the first time we met? I divined your fate by reading your face. Yang Jian's fate is that of a king. He was born into luxury, yet his features tell me he won't meet his end from old age or illness, but some other misfortune. The imperial court is at its peak now, but it too has an inauspicious future. As prosperous as the Tsway are today, they share the fate of Yang Jian. They won't continue beyond the second generation. Yang Jian is destined to end his life in desolation, and his descendants will fare no better. You learned almost every discipline while at my side. The only one you refused to study was divination. Still, you were exposed to it every day. You can't have failed to pick some things up. You must know I speak the truth. In that case, Xianxiang's new master must be a dragon and phoenix among men, blessed from birth with the fate of becoming emperor. Fahn You-in nodded. He is. The pavilion leader is not just a master of pen and sword. It is his fate to become a dragon soaring through the heavens in immeasurable glory. Tsway was growing tired of this talk. After a moment's silence, he heaved a sigh. Since we've come this far, Xianxiang, I'll be blunt. If I wanted to join the 13 floors of Yuanhai, what kind of application would I need to submit? If you want me to assassinate Yang Jian, I fear it's impossible. Fahn You-in had been waiting for just this question. He smiled. Yang Jian will of course be dealt with. Your help is not needed there. However, Yang Jian's wife, Lady Dugu, is unyielding, no less than a man. Even if we eliminate Yang Jian, she'll be a threat to us as long as she remains alive. Dugu trusts you implicitly. You have more opportunities to get closer to her than anyone else. This is where you will lend us a hand, becoming the bridge by which we reach her. Once this matter is concluded, I will apply to the pavilion leader and nominate you for the position of deputy leader. You will rank above everyone else and only answer to him. When he ascends the throne, you'll be a king in all but name. Won't you then be able to enjoy a far more carefree life? Those who treated you callously, like the Tsway family, will beat their chests and weep in remorse. These are empty promises, Tsway said calmly. You know they aren't enough to tempt me. Fahn You-in smiled. Then what about a rare treasure that can repair your body? The Jade of Heaven Lake. Tsway frowned. Fahn You-in glanced toward Yuan Sansa, who stood and went over to the stone wall, his hand groping among the night pearls inlaid in its surface. The ground rumbled, and the tile beneath his foot sank. He bent to the ground and produced a small box from a hidden recess. Yuan Sansa pulled back the lid. In the center, nestled on a bed of thick brocade, was an object. A stone as clear as crystal, shimmering in the dim light. You've seen the Jade of Heaven Lake with your own eyes, said Fahn You-in. You must know the object before you is authentic. Though this stone cannot completely cure your illness, it can prolong your life by several decades. This is the greatest gesture of sincerity I can offer. Feng Xiao had long since turned over the Jade of Heaven Lake to the imperial court. How could it be here? If some mishap had occurred during transport, or if someone had stolen it from the palace after it arrived, Tsway would have heard about it. Yet this jade was the genuine article. He clearly remembered its texture, size, and shape. It was impossible for a second identical stone to exist. Even the interior of the stone was the same, with that pool of icy blue-green at its center. There could be only one explanation. A traitor. Someone who had been working against him ever since he'd arrived in Boling, or perhaps even earlier. Yep. Yep. Feng Xiao. Tsway whispered. Tsway gazed at the Jade of Heaven Lake, and Fahn You-in looked at him. Buchu, you're very talented. To die at such a young age, after only living a few short years, will this not be a pity? Your ambitions, your aspirations, stretch far beyond your current position. Everyone believes leading the Tsway Bureau at your age is already a difficult and lofty achievement, but to you, it's hardly worth mentioning. You and I are the same. We use people as chess pieces. Attitudes, trends, situations, events. These are things for us to play with. Perhaps you care nothing for fame and reputation, but without your life, what can you achieve? Fahn You-in coaxed him along, pleasant yet tireless. It was the same tone with which he'd taught Tsway in the past. This student had always been quick on the uptake, only needing to see one case to understand 3. He believed this time would be no different. Tsway was sure to make the wisest choice. But Tsway remained silent. Fahn You-in waited patiently. To turn traitor and plot a rebellion against one's sovereign was not a decision to be made lightly. Most would be terrified out of their wits at merely hearing such an idea. Tsway was an extraordinary man, but even so, Fahn You-in and Yuan Sansa would have found it suspicious if he agreed too readily. At length, Tsway said, "I want to see Feng Xiao." Fahn You-in showed no surprise at his request. He smiled. "Surely you've guessed already how the jade came to be here. Are you so certain of Feng Xiao? Or are you unable to accept your own deductions?" Tsway's face was indifferent. "Words are easily spoken. I'll trust the evidence of my eyes." Fahn You-in sighed. "Do you not understand? He has joined the 13 floors of Yuanhai. Will you refuse to give up until the truth is staring you in the face? I've never seen you this concerned over someone else's loyalties. Whether he betrayed Yang Jian and joined the 13 floors of Yuanhai, is that so important to you?" "It's very important." Fahn You-in nodded. "Very well." He turned to Yuan Sansa. "I must trouble Yuan Xiong. Please summon the deputy leader." Yuan Sansa turned and left. "Deputy leader?" asked Tsway. "I know the Zoya Bureau has done their due diligence investigating the 13 floors, but I don't imagine you know that our pavilion leader, Yi Shenshang, appoints 2 deputy leaders. These deputies have great authority. They need only give the word, and they can mobilize all connections and resources belonging to floors 2 through 12, regardless of location. No one would dare disobey." All connections and resources, regardless of locations. Tsway turned these words over in his mind, and his expression grew thoughtful. "Then I was right. Lin Yong and Yandang Mountain Estate. Ning Shiwo, leader of the Jinhuan Guild, both are members of the 13 floors." Fahn You-in smiled but said nothing, a tacit confirmation. "You hatched our plan long before Duan Qihu's death. The letter on his corpse wasn't a clue regarding a secret meeting of members of the 13 floors. It was bait you deliberately left. Upon reading the letter, I'd almost certainly attempted to decrypt it. And, even if I didn't go myself, I'd send Qiao Xian and others to investigate its contents. The Zoya Bureau needed to leave someone to oversee matters in the capital, while also dispatching someone for the investigation, me. Without any other support, after running into Yuan Sansa, I'd be sure to ask Feng Xiao for his corroboration. Feng Xiao was already one of yours, and so your trap was sprung. Even if I were to sprout wings, I couldn't escape the 13 floors machinations." "Incredible, Xianxiang. As expected of an old hand. I'm not your match." Fahn Yuen's smile was reserved. "I know you're mistrustful by nature. The letter, Yuan Sansa, Feng Xiao. Had any one of them turned up alone, you would have been suspicious. But confronted with all 3 at once, you became distracted, your judgment muddled. On top of that, while in boiling, you had to deal with the Tsway family's mess. Butcher, even if you have wisdom on par with the gods, you're merely a man. It's impossible for every calculation you make to be flawless." The sound of footsteps came from outside. They were sure and steady, the footfalls of a powerful martial artist who had no intention of moving silently. Tsway could hear every step clearly. 2 beautiful maids entered carrying a wooden tray. On the tray, fragrant wine rippled within a white jade saucer. The maid who stepped forward was clad in white robes and fine gauze, her complexion fair and her hair dark. Her steps were light and graceful. When she bent to see the saucer before them, the curve of her chest swelled beneath the loose drape of her clothing, and the faint smell of her perfume seemed to seep into one's heart. Tsway was no monk oblivious to the vanities of the mundane world. From the moment he'd entered the room, though it was a mere corner within a damp cave, he had seen that every inch of it was lavishly furnished. Leaving aside the night pearls embedded in the stone walls, even the cattail cushion on which he sat was embroidered with gold and silver thread, covered in silk and stuffed with soft cotton and cattail reeds. It was obviously an item of luxury. Nor had he failed to notice that, concealed within this chamber, there were quite a few entrances and exits, all leading to different areas. The room was both hidden and accessible, an ideal gathering place. Whatever else the 13 floors of Yuanhai might want for, they certainly had no lack of wealth. The maid cast him a flirtatious glance, but found Tsway stonily indifferent, his eyes downcast. She set down the saucer of wine and silently withdrew. Fahn You-in watched the exchange with a silent smile. He took a single sip from the saucer. Since antiquity, those meant for greatness had been men possessed of extraordinary restraint. Even if those lovely women were to strip naked and dance before them, Fahn You-in would not be moved. If Tsway had been so easily swayed by their seductions, he'd have held this disciple of his in contempt. Shortly after the maids departed, 2 men entered. The first approached on slow steps and stopped in front of Tsway. His boots were black, in a common style, but their quality was unmatched. Feng Xiao was so fussy, even his boots were required to be outstanding. Tsway recognized them at a glance. He raised his head and met Feng Xiao's eyes. The two gazed at each other, the silence stretching between them. Yuan Sansa smiled. "You've only been apart for a short while. Why do you look at each other like it's been a lifetime since you last met?" Tsway looked up at Feng Xiao. "I would like to hear it from Deputy Chief Feng's mouth. Is it true?" Feng Xiao's expression was one of apathy. There was no smile, no mockery, no malicious glee. His gaze on Tsway was flat with disinterest. The frivolousness with which he'd teased him was gone, as was the enthusiasm with which he'd admired his own reflection. In their place was a serene indifference, as if Tsway was merely a stranger passing by, unworthy of a second glance. When he finally spoke, he said one word. "Yes." "Before arriving in Boling, you were already with him?" "Yes." "The night of the revolt in Qingli Garden, when you insisted on climbing into my carriage, you coincidentally clashed with Yuan Sansa, saving my life. Even then?" "Yes." "I was your trial," said Tsway. "What did they offer you? Something the deputy chief of the Zhejian Bureau would be willing to join the 13 floors of Yuanhai for. Surely it must be extraordinary." Feng Xiao's expression finally flickered ever so slightly. Tsway noticed a fleeting look of pity. Pity for a loser who had been deceived. An itch came into Tsway's throat. He couldn't suppress a cough. Feng Xiao kept his voice very low, but still echoed through the chamber. "There are presently 3 demonic sects: He-Huan sect, Huan-Yue sect, and Fa-Jing sect, the last of which I lead. Many years ago, they were a single unified sect. Their leader was Tsway Youwang, the strongest martial artist, not just among the demonic sects, but in the world," said Feng Xiao. Tsway's expression remained placid. He nodded slightly. "I've heard of this, yes." He'd been betrayed, surrounded by enemies on all sides, but still he retained his composure, at least on the surface. Fahn You-in looked at his pupil and sighed to himself. If he had any choice, he wouldn't have used this method to coerce Tsway's cooperation. Alas, Tsway was a brilliant man and not the type to readily admit defeat. Only something unexpected and overwhelming, something so shocking it left him too stunned to react, would do. Without such an opportunity to convince him, it'd be nigh impossible to persuade Tsway to join the 13 floors of Yuanhai. Of course, it would be far easier to kill him, but a mind like his was rare. The addition of Tsway to their organization would be akin to gifting wings to a tiger. Fahn You-in wished to offer up Tsway's talent to the master he served, not merely kill him to eliminate an obstacle. "Before Tsway Youwang's death," Feng Xiao continued, "he left behind a technique capable of transferring one's blood and soul, as well as recasting their meridians, called refining jade. However, this technique vanished with his death, and no records of it remain. In the past, my master had 3 disciples. Besides Guang Lingsan and myself, we also had a shime. A few years ago, she was gravely ill. Even the best physicians and medicines had no effect. Only the refining jade technique could save her. It was to seek this technique that I joined the Jiejian Bureau. Here, Yuan Sansa took up the story. By coincidence, the pavilion leader had collected many ancient martial texts from around the world. The lost refining jade technique was among them. This technique was recorded in 2 separate volumes. After obtaining the first, Deputy Chief Feng tried it on his Shirmei. Her condition immediately improved. By this point, Tsway had guessed the rest. He nodded. So in order to obtain the 2nd volume, you betrayed me. That was your trial for joining the 13 floors. If I weren't the pitiable fool duped by your schemes, your deep and earnest feelings would surely have moved me, Deputy Chief Feng. Look at your current predicament. Without my help, you have no way out. They doubted my sincerity, so they used you as the trial. If I could sell out even you, they could rest at ease. I didn't expect I was so important to Deputy Chief Feng. Tsway's mouth twisted in mockery. Feng Xiao crouched down so their eyes were level. You're wrong. You're not important. The position of Tsway Chief Bureau that you hold, that's what's important. Honestly, even I was surprised it went so smoothly. I thought for sure you'd bring more people, at least Xiao Xian or Zhang Sun. If you had, perhaps I'd have had a much harder time. Yet you only brought 2 Tsway guards, no better than errand runners, and left the capital with me, completely unconcerned. Could it be that you already trusted me to the point that you were willing to put your life into my hands? Tsway didn't speak. He only coughed, his hand supporting his weight on the cushion becoming colder and whiter. His back was as straight as a pine, but there was a brittleness to it, as if it might snap at the first gust of wind. He was used to coughing, but now he couldn't stop. His lungs burned like fire, filling his chest with waves of scorching pain. The colder his body grew, the hotter they burned. From his heart to his meridians, it spread like a wildfire, licking up withered grass, turning an expanse of soft green into fluttery gray ash. The flames engulfed everything, the creatures and the land, all hearts in their passion. He didn't need to reply. Feng Xiao understood. He laughed and grabbed Tsway's chin, forcing him to meet his gaze. Fan Xianxiang said you're cold on the outside, yet hot on the inside. An icy exterior that conceals a heart full of passion. I didn't believe him before. Now I do. He sneered. How unfortunate that you placed your precious trust in the wrong person, Lord Chief. Chapter 115. Fahn You-in stood and watched. He made no move to stop them. He'd known Tsway and Feng Xiao were each unwilling to submit to the other. If they could be lured in with promised rewards, both would be of great use to the pavilion leader. But it wouldn't do for them to be too friendly. As long as they were at odds, their leader could use one to check the other, and managing them would be much simpler. Thus, he was pleased to no end to see Feng Xiao and Tsway turn on each other. He watched the situation simmer, waiting until the moment where it boiled over to speak. All right, he said. From now on, we're a family. Buchu has been my disciple for a long time, even if he is rather willful. Who's his family? Feng Xiao said, lip curling. He released Tsway's chin and casually wiped his hand on Tsway's clothes, as if merely touching him had been a great humiliation to him. Fan Xianxiang, when you came to recruit me, you did not say you'd be recruiting Tsway as well. Our pavilion leader and Yuan Sansa are both top-tier martial artists with skills not inferior to my own, and you joined long before I did, so you have more experience. I can accept that. But this man... The glance he threw at Tsway was full of contempt and ridicule. How exactly is this man qualified to be deputy leader instantly upon joining? To have an equal rank to myself? Fahn You-in smiled. You jest. Buchu is the chief of the Tsway Bureau. You are from the Jiejian Bureau. Was he not always your equal? That was only because he had Empress Dugu to give him a leg up, said Feng Xiao coolly. Her favor won him his current position. And to be honest, I have yet to see this leader of yours. If I spoke some nonsense claiming to be loyal to the 13 floors for its own sake, I'm sure you wouldn't believe me. Fahn Xiansheng. You speak sincerely. I believe you. Fahn You-in replied smoothly. I joined the 13 floors for 3 reasons. First, to obtain the refining jade technique. Second, your promise that I could attain rank and authority far beyond what I could achieve in Tsway. Third, so I wouldn't need to spend every day bickering with this Tsway bastard. But now, you're telling me that not only must I see him regularly, we must serve as officials together after we bring about the new dynasty? I've sold him out. I can't take that back. But he's sure to hold a grudge against me. If you insist on welcoming him like this, is it any different from putting a blade to my back? Fahn You-in remained unbothered. Then what does Fang Gongzi propose? Either me or him. There can only be one. Feng Xiao narrowed his eyes and raised his chin. He oozed arrogance. The lines of his body were sharp as a blade, his eyes ablaze. Now this was the Feng Xiao Tsway knew, and it was the image Deputy Chief Feng left in most people's minds. Wayward and unbridled, playful and teasing. It was like this Feng Xiao whiled away his time. Yet hidden beneath that veneer was someone proud and unrestrained, a man blessed by the heavens from birth. Though Fahn You-in was happy to see conflict between the two, it would bring him no benefit if their enmity impaired the 13 floors' plans. He couldn't ignore Feng Xiao's declaration. He considered a moment and said, All right, I will speak to our leader. After Buchu finishes his task, he will fake his death and head south. He can start over there. Feng Xiao's handsome face was cold and impassive, but he voiced no objections. Only belatedly did Fahn You-in remember to ask, What do you think, Buchu? Tsway started to chuckle. As he laughed, he began to cough, and the harder he coughed, the more he laughed, until he was gasping for breath. It seems you've already decided everything for me. Does it matter whether I agree or not? Fahn You-in's expression was mild as he watched Tsway laugh like a madman, as if his pupils were no more than a willful child throwing a tantrum. Considering your situation, I was certain you wouldn't refuse. Tsway laughed for nearly a quarter of an hour before he slowly lapsed into silence. Xiansheng, you're getting old, he said at last. Fahn You-in raised a brow. Oh? Since the 11th year of the Jin dynasty's Taiyuan era, the northern dynasties have seen the 3 ways, Northern Qi and Northern Zhou, 5 dynasties across more than 2 centuries. They met with every kind of turmoil. The foreigners of the north storming south, the flames of war, the rise of powerful clans, the collapse of dynasties, the struggle for power between Buddhists and Taoists. This continued until the reign of Emperor Wu of Northern Zhou, who quelled the chaos and rebuilt everything anew. Despite the mediocre emperors who succeeded him, the long-separated nations of the Central Plains are fated to become one once more. This will always be the case. Yang Jian may not be a match for the legendary 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, but he is an enlightened ruler, the first such after Emperor Wu, Youwang. Fahn You-in smiled. To think you have such a high opinion of Yang Jian. Tsway coughed several times and continued. No emperor before him, including those of the Song, Qi, Liang, and Chun dynasties in the south, has turned his authority on the aristocrats. Yang Jian alone dared to overturn the status quo. He issued an edict promoting officials based on criteria of meticulousness, prudence, efficiency, and honesty. Even the poor have a path through which they may elevate themselves. Perhaps it is a narrow path now, but in years to come, it will broaden. Eventually, the notion of determining rank by dint of one's birth will be replaced entirely, and the new principle upon which the world turns will be born. Taking only this as an example, I must ask, who else would risk drawing the ire of the world's most powerful clans to execute such a mighty, radical idea? I fear that Xiansheng's chosen master lacks the resolve. Elevating talent wherever it is found is of course a good thing, Fahn You-in countered. But Yang Jian is too reckless in his methods. He'll eventually be too buried in criticism to make any headway. Even the emperor can't ignore all the dissenting opinions around him. I've already said being an emperor was always his destiny, but unfortunately, he's an emperor doomed to fall. Dazzling as he may be now, his reign will be short-lived. A ruler must understand when to push and when to relent. They must understand that it's the narrow river that flows the farthest. Only then will they achieve a lasting legacy. Let me guess. Xianxiang's chosen master is certainly not the emperor of southern Chun. If one wishes to conquer the land, they have two options. The first is to follow in the footsteps of Yang Jian and wrest power from those who hold it via blood ties. But this took Yang Jian decades, far too long for your lord. He can't wait. So, he's left with the second option. He must take an immense risk and walk the less trodden road, craft and execute an enormous conspiracy. But have you truly thought this through? The lands have been divided for a long time. What the people want is crystal clear. Even if your lord succeeds in seizing the throne, if he doesn't govern with a hand at least as firm as Yang Jian's, his attempt will be in vain. Tsway watched Fahn You-in's face, which was growing darker and darker. He held nothing back as he spoke, quiet and steady, every word keen as a knife. Perhaps I wasn't clear. Did you really believe you had the power to convince me? You've woefully overestimated yourselves. The 13 floors are no more than flies and dogs that should huddle in the dark sewers where you belong rather than showing your faces and making fools of yourselves. Upon hearing these words, Yuan-san frowned. His hand twitched, and he only looked at Fahn You-in. Feng Xiao's lashes were lowered. He wasn't looking at Tsway or anyone else. It was as if he'd detached himself from this place entirely, his thoughts inscrutable. Tsway had bluntly sawn open their ambitions and ideals, bit by ragged bit, exposing the bloody guts for all to see. Fahn You-in's smile finally vanished completely. When smiling, his face was kindly and amiable. But now, with his lips drawn into a thin line, there was a palpable chill about him. Buchu, I didn't teach you just for you to try to prove you know better than me. That's why I said you're getting old, Xianxiang. As people grow old, they grow arrogant. They believe their experience alone will allow them to surmount any challenge. It's a pity even Xianxiang is not exempt from this failing. Tsway was in enemy territory, facing off against 3 experts who could crush him with a finger. Yet his tongue remained as poisonous as ever, giving no quarter to his opponents. I take it you're refusing to join? Asked Fahn You-in. Even if the Jade of Heaven Lake can save your life. My apologies. Tsway pursed his thin lips. I've never deigned to work with fools. If someone like Fungar can become a deputy leader, this is already a sinking ship. Now, if you're willing to surrender yourself to the court and turn over your master, I might consider putting in a word for you before the emperor. Fahn You-in's attempt had failed utterly. He laughed in anger. We've known each other for years. We are master and disciple, as close as father and son. In light of this, I'll ask you one last time. Do you understand the consequences of refusing? Us, as close as father and son, Tsway asked in surprise. So, is it your family tradition for fathers to set up their sons to be betrayed, or for sons to push their fathers into evil? Such a unique family you have, Xianxiang. Fahn You-in looked at Tsway as if he were regarding a corpse. At this moment, one of the stone walls slid open, and a man walked in. The man's face had a delicate youthfulness that lent an androgynous air to his features. He was beautiful, if one ignored the eye patch covering one eye. That single flaw gave his face a sinister cast. His gaze fell first upon Feng Xiao. Between the two of you, I was sure Tsway would be the one to join, while you would refuse to submit even on pain of death. A shame. I was hoping to avenge this lost eye of mine. Feng Xiao shrugged. We each served our own masters then. Blades cared not whom they cut. If I had not fought you with my full strength, I fear I would have lost my life. Fahn You-in stepped between them. Our Xianxiang, Feng Gongzi didn't do it out of malice. Right now, we're all on the same side. We must let go of our grievances. Let us shake hands and make peace. Our leader has already agreed to compensate you properly." Yushu bared his teeth in a chilling smile. "Of course. I can't hold a grudge against one of my own. Tsway, this is why you shouldn't be so quick to make enemies. A day will always come when you will meet again. But fear not. Out of respect for you foiling my plans time and again, I'll make sure your death isn't a painless one." Without warning, he leapt forward, his leg lashing out in a kick aimed for Tsway's chest. He'd held nothing back. If that kick connected, Tsway's ribs would shatter, their fragments puncturing his lungs in an instant. Yuan-san was closest. He had only to reach out, and he could stop the kick. Yet, he had no intention of doing so. But there was still Fahn You-in. Though he was beneath Yushu as the third-ranked San Xiansheng, Yushu was wary of him, a clear sign that, of the two, the pavilion leader valued Fahn You-in more. Yet Fahn You-in said nothing either. He watched coolly from the side, as if resolved to see Tsway suffer. It was impossible for Tsway to avoid the kick. He closed his eyes and waited for agony to lance through him. Yet someone else was faster than any of them had imagined. He swept in front of Yushu and deftly deflected the attack. The two exchanged several swift blows before springing apart. Yushu's face was a mask of fury. "Fengxiao, you said you would join us. So, it was a lie?" Fahn You-in and Yuan-san both glared fiercely at Fengxiao. No matter how excellent a martial artist Fengxiao was, 3 opponents of this caliber were too much for him. He sneered and looked at Yushu like he was a fool. "I've found Tsway distasteful for a long time. If you get first shot at him, will there be any left for me? Look at the state of him." Yushu narrowed his eyes. "And you plan to leave him alive for me? What are you going to do? Give him a few dainty slaps across the face like a woman?" Fengxiao laughed derisively and extended a hand toward Fahn You-in. "Fan Xiansheng, perhaps you'd be kind enough to lend me your dagger." Fahn You-in untied the dagger at his waist and handed it over. He watched Fengxiao carefully, as if testing whether Fengxiao really had sworn himself to their cause. Fengxiao looked down at the dagger in his hand. It was a rare and precious weapon, razor sharp and glinting with cold light. If a blade this sharp was drawn lightly over one's skin, blood would instantly well up in its wake. He gripped the dagger and walked step by step toward Tsway, who remained sitting, perfectly calm. They were a mere arm's length from each other, yet separated by a yawning chasm, a distance as vast as mountains and oceans between them. Chapter 116. His acting is too perfect. He's overdoing it, Tsway thought. If time could reverse, and he could return to the moments before they entered Mount Tianan, he'd have told Fengxiao that going too far was just as bad as stopping short. Moderation was the key. Maybe Yushu and Yuan-san couldn't tell, but he oughtn't to underestimate Fahn You-in. But this was a fantasy. Even he'd never expected Fengxiao would do such a thing, that he'd sell him out to the 13 floors without a word to gain their trust. Yet this was indeed Fengxiao's style, willful and reckless, walking the treacherous path, fighting without leaving an out for himself. If Tsway hadn't been the poor sucker who'd been set up, he would have praised Fengxiao's plan. But right now, he was in a terrible predicament. If Fengxiao showed him mercy, he'd be unable to win the trust of Yushu and the others. If Fengxiao showed none, all he'd sacrifice was a man who was neither an enemy nor a friend. So why wouldn't he be ruthless? Either do it right or don't do it at all. Tsway watched as Fengxiao approached a step at a time. He dropped to one knee, coming eye to eye with Tsway. Fengxiao's handsome face remained devoid of expression. A faint light flickered in the depths of his eyes, cold and remote. There was no reflection of Tsway within them. He was on the knife's edge between life and death, but Tsway's mind was wandering. If it were him, he thought, what would he do? One couldn't capture a tiger cub without venturing into the tiger's den. If Tsway had been in the same position, perhaps he'd have made the very same choice as Feng Xiao. Tsway silently chuckled to himself. The fact that he was thinking about this at all was proof his heart was in turmoil. Tsway had always been cold and decisive, a man who didn't hesitate to weave even himself in his own plots. Never before had he wondered anything of the sort. "Have you ever thought how you would die?" he heard Feng Xiao ask. Tsway tilted his head a little as he gave it serious thought. "I used to think I'd die in the Tsway manner, but I didn't. After I left, there were a few treacherous incidents where I thought I was done for, but I didn't die then either. Later, in the Khaganate, I thought I'd die in that yurt with Yushu, but in the end, you came in time." Feng Xiao's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then you've been quite fortunate." Tsway nodded. "I think so too." Feng Xiao's hand flashed forward. Coldness slid into Tsway's chest, and sharp agony exploded through him. He looked down at the dagger, buried to the hilt in his flesh. Blood spilled from the wound, soaking his robes in crimson. Pain. Excruciating pain. He furrowed his brow, trying to recall the last time he'd felt pain like this. There was the year he'd left the Tsway family. At that time, both his lungs and heart had troubled him greatly, and he had been caught in a heavy downpour on the road. He'd curled up beneath the eaves, but the wind whipped the rain in, battering his face and drenching his clothes. He'd burned with fever, his head hazy and muddled. He thought he'd die that night. Then there was the time, not long ago at all, when he'd used instance of helplessness against Yushu in the Western Khaganate, poisoning himself along with his enemy to aggravate his existing illness. Yushu had wrapped his fingers around Tsway's neck. His vision had sparked with stars, and every breath had been excruciating. But it hadn't been as painful as it was now. Could the dagger be poisoned? He instinctively tried to draw breath, but it only aggravated his wound. His entire body trembled with pain, and his face was paler than the gauzy snow-white robes of those two beautiful maids. Bloody foam bubbled at the corner of his mouth as he panted raggedly, but he didn't moan. Feng Xiao had thought he'd be treated to sneering mockery and vicious curses from Tsway, but there was nothing. He saw Tsway's thin lips stained with blood, trembling as they moved in a near-soundless sentence. "You saved my life last time. I've repaid you now." A slight involuntary tremor went through Feng Xiao's hand. He was still holding the dagger's hilt. That quiver instantly worsened the pain Tsway was in. Blood, thick and red, slid from the corner of his mouth to drip from the tip of his chin. It fell drop by drop onto his lapels, dyeing the fabric with bright splashes of red. The whole thing had happened in a flash. For a moment, everyone stood dumbfounded. Shock and disbelief were scrawled over Yuan Sansa's face. Even Yushu thought Feng Xiao had gone mad. Tsway had refused to join, but now wasn't the time to kill him. Yushu had only wanted to torture him a bit to vent his anger, but Feng Xiao had taken it a step further, going straight for the kill. "Stop!" Fahn You-in cried, reaching out to shove Feng Xiao away. Feng Xiao didn't dodge. He allowed Fahn You-in to push him back a few steps. Fahn You-in stepped forward to examine Tsway's wound. In seconds, he'd sealed several major acupoints and called for someone to bring gauze and medicine. Feng Xiao had shown no mercy. All of them could see that the blade was fully buried inside Tsway's body. Even Yushu couldn't claim Feng Xiao was putting on an act. "You're too rash, Feng Gongzi," Fahn You-in snapped. "Even if he refuses to join us now, he's still of more use to us alive." Very carefully, he drew the dagger from Tsway's chest. A fresh spurt of blood followed the tip as it was extracted. Tsway slumped against one of the cave's rocks, limp and unmoving. He was barely conscious. "Like I said," Feng Xiao said coldly, "it's either me or him. We have the Zhejian Bureau already. I don't see how keeping the Zuoye Bureau chief alive is useful, unless it's so he can rat me out to the court." Fahn You-in was furious. "If he dies, a great number of our plans will be ruined." Feng Xiao smiled thinly. To think Fahn You-in would still value him so much, as expected of the disciple who was your pride and joy. In the end, you can't put aside your fondness for him. But you were the one who lured him here. To get so upset over it now, don't you think it's hypocritical? No one in the Tsway Bureau knows he's here, Fahn You-in said severely. We could have used him as bait for his subordinates, then captured them all in one fell swoop. Our leader admires Tsway and sees him as a kindred spirit. Not long ago, he sent a message informing us that he wishes to meet him in person. If he dies on our watch, how will I explain? Feng Xiao dusted off his clothes and said nonchalantly, Those are Fahn You-in's problems, not mine. He turned to leave without sparing a glance for anyone else. Yuan Sansa watched him melt into the darkness. That man has a heart of stone, to deal a fatal blow to his former comrade without batting an eye, he whispered. If we welcome him, I fear we'll be cultivating a threat to ourselves. Yushu snorted a laugh. If anything, he did me a service. If Fahn You-in hadn't forbidden it, I'd have killed Tsway before he got to him. Fahn You-in checked Tsway's pulse. After a moment, he sighed. I'll take him back first. His wound is severe. I doubt he'll wake up anytime soon. There's no way he can meet our leader like this. I'll have to send him word and wait for his decision. If there's anything else, we can discuss it later. So saying, he scooped Tsway and up in his arms and hurried away. Feng Xiao's stab had been ruthless. Tsway had lost too much blood. His pulse was terribly faint. His life hung by a thread. To save him, Fahn You-in poured all his strength into protecting Tsway's already fragile heart, preserving his life and channeling young energy into him. For 4 hours, he pulled Tsway back from the edge of death, a feat more exhausting than dueling a master martial artist, before some heat finally returned to Tsway's chest. For the moment, he was out of danger. Fahn You-in's face was white with fatigue, and his legs were weak and wobbly. He entrusted Tsway's care to his maid and returned to his room to meditate and recover his strength. The woman left to serve Tsway was one of the maids who'd brought the wine saucers earlier. She soaked a cloth and wrought out the water, using it to dab away the blood on Tsway's face. Tsway's injuries were severe, and Fahn You-in had given strict orders that he wasn't to be moved or turned. The maid carefully peeled away his outer robes, leaving him clothed in a single inner garment. He was a gruesome sight, over half his body crusted with dried blood. The maid moved him as gently as possible, afraid to startle him and cause him more pain. But Tsway was insensible to everything. From beginning to end, his eyes remained shut, as silent as a corpse. The cave they were in had once contained treasures from a bygone dynasty. After the trove's discovery, Yuan Sansa had transformed it into a base for the 13 floors of Yuanhai, one of several such strongholds in the north. It was spacious yet concealed, guarded by traps and hidden passages, and all the chambers were conveniently interlinked. Its interior comforts were in no way inferior to the manner of any noble clan. In fact, its chambers might have been even more lavishly appointed. Feng Xiao, however, was a man who spent his days drowning in luxury and was moreover fussy to the extreme. He showed no reaction even when presented with the most opulent of furnishings, using them as casually as one might common wares. The chamber where he had stabbed Tsway reeked of blood. He left it without a backward glance and returned to his room. A familiar, sensual fragrance hit him as he entered, overpowering the metallic stench that lingered in his nose. A half-naked beauty reclined upon his bed, her sweet scent adding a touch of charm to the erotic picture before him. A thin blanket was artfully draped over the beauty's chest to reveal the rounded top of her ample breasts, and a pair of long legs peeked from beneath the covers, smooth and pale as creamy jade. Her eyes fluttered open, shimmering like starlight beneath the glow of night pearls. When she smiled at Feng Xiao, even the stars adorning the night sky outside seemed to lose their luster. "You're back," she said languidly. Only 2 words, but they were drippingly tender, seeping into the listener's bones. Feng Xiao felt as if a delicate claw was tickling his ear. Anyone who could remain unaffected by such a tableau wasn't fit to be called a man. "Why are you in my bed?" Feng Xiao didn't move from the doorway. His eyes were tranquil as he looked her up and down as if she were a statue of stone. Feng Xiaolian nearly laughed in rage. "I'm beginning to suspect that none of the men within the 13 floors have anything between their legs. You're the fourth one who's looked at this body of mine without any reaction." Feng Xiao raised one brow. "Who are the other 3? Please introduce me to these upstanding gentlemen." Feng Xiaolian sniffed coquettishly and slid to the edge of the bed, wrapping the blanket around her as a makeshift robe. She sat up and began to count off her fingers. "The pavilion leader, Fan Xianxiang, Yushu, and now you. Fan Xianxiang has incredible willpower, so he hardly counts. Yushu's heart belongs to another. In his eyes, I'm scarcely better than a corpse. Anyway, I'd rather not provoke him. But you, why are you so unaffected? It makes no sense." She rose from the bed, the dark blanket forming a train behind her as she padded over to Feng Xiao and circled around him. Without warning, she reached out to embrace him from behind, only to find her arms full of empty air. She trod on the blanket and tripped, falling to the floor. "Feng Xiao!" She sounded as if she might pass away from rage. "What about Yuan Sansa? Is he also immune to your charms?" Feng Xiao smiled and bent down, scooping her up and tossing her carelessly onto the bed. Feng Xiaolian slanted him a look, her demeanor a seamless blending of sensuality and innocence. "Do you think I accept just anyone? I have no interest in someone like Yuan Sansa." What a rare creature you are." Feng Xiao climbed atop her, unhurried, and lowered his mouth to her ear. "You've met the pavilion leader before?" Feng Xiaolian thought herself the most peerless of beauties, a woman who'd seen it all. But when she felt the heat of Feng Xiao's breath on her neck, she found her composure slipping. Of course I have. Be gentle." Her voice rose in pitch, turning into a drawn-out gasp. "Whore." A man's voice from behind the door. Okay. Sorry. In the next moment, they heard the speaker turn on his heels and leave. On the bed, Feng Xiaolian blinked. "Why did you grab my waist?" "Why did you play along?" countered Feng Xiao. Feng Xiaolian smiled. "Isn't it an honor to enjoy a romantic evening with the deputy leader? I'd bet good money our eavesdropper just now was Yuan Sansa." "Is he so jealous of me?" Feng Xiaolian giggled. "No, he doesn't trust you. You knew it was him from his footsteps. You're quite skilled. You shouldn't have ranked below Duan Zihu and Youwang." Feng Xiaolian stretched languidly. "I did obtain the title of the 13th director, Shisan Xianshang, but it was only thanks to my reputation and my knowledge of some secret pear cultivation techniques. How could grandmasters and experts like you hold me as your equal? Feng Lang, you're flirting with me now, but your heart isn't in it. Could it be—" The hand behind Feng Xiao's back slowly clenched into a fist. "Could it be that you're like Yushu? You already have a beloved?" she finished. Feng Xiao neither confirmed nor denied. "What do you think?" Feng Xiaolian twinned her arms around his neck. "I think most people are too far beyond you to catch your eye. The only person you love is yourself." Feng Xiao smiled. "You know, I'm starting to like you. What kind of man is the pavilion leader?" "Why are you so interested in the pavilion leader?" Feng Xiaolian asked curiously. "He's built such a formidable organization and gathered so many powerful masters and factions beneath him. Who wouldn't be curious? I'm the newly appointed deputy leader, yet I've never laid eyes on the man. Surely that's rather odd." "Worry not," Feng Xiaolian said with a smile. "It's the Qixi festival tomorrow, the 7th day of the 7th month. I heard the leader will be there as well. Our 13 floors will be a full house then. All of us will be present." Something flickered in Feng Xiao's eyes. "Will Ling Yong and Ning Shiwo also be there?" Of course, said Feng Xiaolian. You don't think they really went to Donghai Commandery? This is the real meeting location. But of the 13 floors, I still don't know the identities of the 9th and 10th directors, Jiu Xiansheng and Shi Xiansheng. Who are they? Feng Xiaolian tittered. If you act so impatient, I'll start getting suspicious. Perhaps you only pretended to join so you could probe for information, Feng Xiao smiled. If I say I'm here for you, would you believe me? Feng Xiaolian blinked as Feng Xiao lowered his head as if to kiss her. She had just parted her lips to speak when her expression shifted. She took to the air like a swallow, sweeping out from beneath Feng Xiao. The dark blanket covering her was torn to shreds in the air, yet she ignored it and sprang toward the exit. Help! But Feng Xiao was faster. Before she could put any force behind her cry, a bloody gash rent her throat. Feng Xiaolian opened her lovely eyes wide and stared at Feng Xiao. Never had she imagined she'd meet such a comical, unceremonious end. How clever of you. I only wanted to knock you out, but you saw through me, Feng Xiao said regretfully. When he drew back his hand, there was a blood-stained zither string on it. Had Tsway known Feng Xiao would pluck out the strings of his beloved Youwang to use as a murder weapon, Tsway wouldn't have needed to do anything at all. He'd have died right there, apoplectic with rage. This is going to be rather troublesome, Feng Xiao murmured to himself, still holding one of the beauty's supple arms. Tsway wandered within the darkness, his body sinking endlessly. He felt someone take hold of his hand, slowly pulling him out of the abyss, inch by inch. His savior had immense strength. Tsway was unable to resist him. He was dragged up to solid ground, but his suffering continued. An intense agony racked his body, and memories poured in like the rising tide. He wanted to cough, but the pain prevented him. His mind was disoriented and confused. For a moment, he was certain he was still 9 years old, thrust back into his darkest hour with no end in sight. He couldn't die. He absolutely couldn't die. He had to live. He must live. His lips were pried open, and a coolness trickled in. The searing pain in his throat was alleviated, but the agony in his chest burned only more fiercely. Someone seemed to be whispering in his ear. They gripped his feeble fingers, their touch light as a feather, as tender as if he was a treasure they were afraid to break. For as long as he could remember, Tsway had experienced all sorts of ups and downs as he traveled the treacherous road that was his life. He was fated to lose those dear to him. He was a cold and callous man. It was impossible that he could receive such gentleness. So, it's a dream after all. He breathed a silent sigh before letting the darkness claim him once more. Well, I'm so upset. Why am I upset? Because that's the end of the 3rd volume, and there's no 4th volume, and there's no 5th volume. Oh my God, what did we just read together, you guys? Oh my God. I don't even know, like, I have my notes, but I don't even know where to start. What do I do with my life? Okay, I'm gonna just start at the top of my notes, and then I'll just have to figure life out when we get to the last few. Okay, please excuse my scatterbrainedness, because what the actual Okay. So first off, I have to say this Ursa Major twin jade array that has arrays and subarrays, or traps and subtraps. First off, that's just too much for my poor little brain. I don't have time. Like, I'm telling y'all, I am not one of those people that really cared for the escape rooms. Did I try it once before? Absolutely. And we were so close to winning, but Yeah, my group lost. Anyway, I'm not the type that really enjoys those type of things. So to be in a place that has arrays and arrays for the arrays, I'm like, no, just absolutely not. Boo, 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 boo. Next, this was something I wanted to say in the chapters before the last video, but I'll say it in this one because I think he did it like once or twice. I noticed that in the last chapters of the last video that Tsway had started referring to Feng Xiao in his head, at least, as Fengar, which I thought was quite interesting because there was a time when Feng Xiao actually told him to call me Feng Arlang or Fengar. I don't remember. But again, it's a more comfortable name than just saying like Feng Xiao. So anyway, that was like hint number one that Feng Xiao was changing in the place in his heart or the space in his heart, even if it was like a small little subtle change. Next, we're gonna go to this array, but him finally meeting the person that is the white-haired man, Fahn You-in, being his previous master, but well, at least this person has a face now and a point in the plot. And you know, it's pretty unfortunate. I'm definitely with Tsway when he was like, wait, so if you're calling us family, is this what family does? That, you know, we just have our sons betrayed? And okay, fine. That's weird. Like, I already had the problems with the Tsway family. You think I need this too? Is what my brain was thinking. But I thought it was quite interesting when he mentioned Fahn You-in, mentioned the Jade of Heaven Lake, because when it first came out, all the way in volume 1, I thought about Tsway using it. But of course, nothing ever happened with that, so I kind of just let it go. But I always did wonder what really happened with it. And I guess now we know. So the other thing, Feng Xiao. I'm going to just tell y'all what I wrote on my note. Because I was thinking this before we even got to the reveal, which you would know because I was just reading and, you know, not stopping to share my thoughts. But I have Feng Xiao. He's a traitor. He's the traitor? Darn it. I knew it. But also, I don't know it. That was... yeah. It's like, okay, sometimes you gotta traitor to traitor. You gotta traitor to trait. You gotta trait to traitor. I don't even know how I'm trying to say it. Double cross. Yeah, let's go with that. This man is not a real traitor, but he's a traitor. And, man, Feng Xiao. First off, why you have to look at my baby Tsway like that with such disdain and disgust? Why you have to talk to him like that? Why you have to talk like he's so unworthy? And why did you have to stab him with a dagger? Ah! Tsway, you should have told him beforehand. You just gotta like have contingency plans with Feng Xiao. You gotta just like go ahead and come up with all possible scenarios and give little nudges and warnings in the beginning. Like, hey, just letting you know, I'm gonna say that this is too far. I'm gonna say that this is too little. I'm gonna say that this is just right. Okay, we are the three bears, and Goldilocks needs it just right. Okay, because my God, like you basically killed him. Had it not been for Fahn You-in, man would have died. And I don't know if in the moment he was considering that or not. Okay. I don't know what else to say. What guides him ashore? I don't know. Because that's the end of the book. That was all 374 pages. And the next page, 375, is blank. And I'm so upset. Can you tell I'm upset? Because we don't have the next two books. I feel like I'm flipping my lid right now. I need June 24th to come immediately. Immediately. 很快. 马上. Because I need to know what happens next. So, yeah. With that being said, I don't have anything else left to say. Y'all can just let me know y'all thoughts and comments and thoughts and reactions in the comment section. And let's just discuss these chapters because my brain, my heart. I don't know what to do right now. Do I have anything else to say? Okay, of course. Yes, I do have something else to say. So I know that I said when we are switching from one Danmei series to another that we would take, a 3-day vacation, 4 or 5, depending on how long the series was. And technically we're still not done with Peerless because we have 2 books left, but we are officially going to be starting next week Guardian or Jun-hyun by Priest. So I'm not sure if the first video will land or launch on Monday or if it will be Tuesday, because I think I want to just give myself the weekend completely. So that being, I want to give myself Saturday and Sunday off, and Monday. So yeah, Tuesday is when the first drop of Guardian is going to land, and that's where we are. And we'll just figure out how we tackle that. I also want to let you guys know that I do have an official date and time now for the live Q&A, which of course I will make a post about this separately, but since I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and tell you now. The live Q&A is going to take place on Saturday, June 21st from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which would be 8:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I don't know what it is in all the other times in the world. Anyway, I've got lots of questions already. You guys can keep them coming in, or you could just wait till the live, and we're just going to see how things work out. So I don't really have anything else to say. I need to take a moment to just digest what I just read, on top of the fact I have to actually upload this video and then listen and all that crap that you guys don't really care about. So yeah, please let me know your thoughts and reactions in the comments section. And Yo-wahng.